The corridor was silent. Too silent. 17 decks below the bridge of the alien dreadnought Karsal, the temperature dipped to a deathly chill. Not from any system's failure, but from something deeper, something primal. Steam hissed from a fractured coolant pipe, curling into the shadows like tendrils of breath from a buried giant. Lights that once flickered with sterile brilliance had long since died, their final sparks swallowed by creeping, unnatural darkness. A maintenance drone whirred nervously down the hallway. Its chassis twitched, reacting to errant vibrations in the floor, sensory echoes of something moving, out of sync. The ship's AI chirped a warning. Minor disturbance. Low threat level. Proceed. But the drone hesitated, an algorithmic twitch, as though some primitive instinct had been born in its circuits. Then it moved forward. It made it exactly 7 meters before its body halted mid-air, held there by something unseen. It hovered for one heartbeat, then shattered in silence. Metal fragments scattered like ash, spinning across the floor until they rested in a pattern. Not random, not chaotic, deliberate. Something ancient. Human. They never saw what killed it. Above, within the vast cathedral-like command bridge, General Voltron stood motionless before the central display, his 12 oculars reflecting stuttering error, codes, and ghost signals. The Karsal was no ordinary ship. It was a symbol of power, the pride of the Tarsari Dominion. 2 kilometers of armor-plated death, carrying over 20,000 crew and enough firepower to atomize moons. It had devoured rebel fleets, incinerated pirate colonies, and crushed resistance across 17 systems. But now, it was afraid. And so was Voltron. Born under the searing triple suns of Kexia Prime, where shadows were faint and fleeting, Voltron's species had long considered darkness unnatural, a defect of primitive worlds, a flaw in creation. From hatchling to warrior, he had been taught that to fear the dark was a weakness of lesser minds. But as he stared into the sensor voids where no signal returned, where heat signatures bled, into silence and static, he felt something new rise in his chest. Tight, sharp, suffocating. Fear. The humans had slipped aboard 5 cycles ago. A single drop team. A last-ditch effort by a crumbling resistance force to strike at the heart of the Dominion. They should have been captured in minutes. Overwhelmed. Dissected for study. Instead, they disappeared. Like ghosts into a graveyard. Imagine. What? If this happened to you. Hunted not in open battle where you could draw your blade and scream your defiance, but in silence. In shadows. Where your greatest weapons meant nothing, and your bravado only fed the predator stalking you. They had assumed humans feared the dark. They were wrong. Before we jump into this epic tale, subscribe to StarBound's HFY for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. In the beginning, Voltron had ignored the reports. A missing patrol? A malfunctioning camera? Routine? Statistical anomalies. But the anomalies multiplied. First, a crewman in engineering. Dead, throat crushed in a silent scream. Then an entire security squad, found piled together in total darkness. Not a wound visible, but every one of them dead from cardiac arrest. Their minds had broken before their bodies. Worse were the messages, scratched into walls with claws or carved with melted plasma tools. English phrases, unreadable to most, but terrifying in their implications. We see you. Run now. Darkness feeds us. Psychological warfare, or prophecy. The Tarsari believed themselves superior in all aspects. Intellect, biology, military prowess. Their ships radiated light, gleamed with gold and white alloys. Their architecture designed to repel darkness at every level. Light was comfort. Control. The humans had used that belief like a knife. The sabotage began slowly. A coolant leak here. A gravity distortion there. Then entire power conduits vanished. Lights flickered. Died. Communications dropped. The ship's AI, designed to predict insurgencies, offered no guidance. It didn't understand the human strategy. Because it wasn't strategy, it was instinct. Sergeant Talon Voss crouched in the darkness of Deck 17, his breath shallow, timed with the hiss of coolant overhead. His eyes, shielded beneath adaptive combat lenses, glowed faintly, one of the few hints he still lived at all. Around him, his team moved like liquid shadow. No words, no lights, just presence, trust. They had trained for this in the void caverns of Luna Prime, where silence and pitch black were sacred. They were no longer soldiers. They were ghosts. Predators evolved from a species that learned to fear the night and then conquer it. Echo 1 to Shadowpack, Voss whispered, barely a sound in the black. Core is 5 levels down, no resistance. A faint click answered him. No words. Words could betray, and they were listening. Above, chaos took root. The command crew splintered. Dozens of species, each with their own ancestral nightmares about the dark. Some demanded a retreat. Others urged purging the infected decks with plasma. But Voltron held firm, because he knew. This wasn't random violence. It was a message. The humans didn't want to destroy the ship, not yet. They wanted to remind the Tarsari of something ancient. That darkness is not absence. It's presence. It's waiting. It's home. And now, it hunted. Voltron turned from the display and gazed out into the stars, trying to steady his nerves. The universe beyond looked calm, distant, unknowing. But behind him, beneath him, within the walls of his own flagship, an old truth was rising. Humans had never feared the dark. They had become it. The air on the bridge of the Karsal grew, thick with tension as the alien officers exchanged uneasy glances. Voltron stood at the helm, his towering figure cutting a silhouette against the banks of holographic displays. His 12 oculars, each a perfect organ of vision, flicked to every sensor readout. But the results were always the same. Nothing. The humans had disappeared once more, swallowed by the dark, like shadows fading into a night they owned. It wasn't just a matter of sabotage anymore. It was psychological warfare on a scale Voltron had never conceived. "What are they doing?" a young Quosal officer asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and fear. She was inexperienced, too young to have ever faced anything like this. Her species had evolved in a perpetual twilight, never knowing the full extremes of light and dark, but even they knew the weight of fear when it lurked unspoken. "They've stopped killing." "That's because they're hunting," Voltron growled, his voice low, dark, and heavy with understanding. The idea hit him like a blow to the chest. This wasn't just an attack. This was their version of game. They had taken the darkness and made it their domain, their sanctuary, their weapon. It's not enough to kill us in the light. They want to take everything, every last fragment of our confidence. They want us to know we're not just powerless. We're prey. The officer took a step back. There was a sudden shift in the air, as if the very fabric of the Karsal knew it had been marked. Prey. The word echoed in their minds, hanging there like a noose, tightening with every passing moment. The lights in the corridors were still, dead, and the usual hum of the ship's engines was absent, as though the Karsal itself was holding its breath. For the past 5 cycles, nothing had moved except for the occasional flicker of a security drone, which had vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. A team of 35 had been sent to investigate the reactor core after an energy fluctuation, only to be found lifeless in a heap. No visible wounds, no signs of struggle, but all of them with their faces locked in expressions of sheer terror. No one could explain it. Down on the lower decks, Sergeant Voss and his remaining team moved with deadly precision. The blackness swallowed them, their cloaks melding with the ship's dark interior, as they passed through hallways of steel and iron, their boots soundless against the cold metal floors. Each step was deliberate, measured. Not even the air seemed to breathe here. It was as if the Karsal itself was afraid of what was coming. But Voss wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He had grown up in the caves of Terra Nova, a remote mining colony where the earth was alive with veins of molten rock, and the darkness in the tunnels was not just a physical absence, but a force in its own right. The miners had told stories about it. Ancient things that lived in the shadows. Things that had never been seen in the light of day. Voss had heard the whispers as a child, and while he dismissed them as nothing more than stories to scare young miners into following orders, now standing in the depths of the Karsal, those tales felt like prophecy. 2 minutes to core, Voss whispered into his team's comms. The faintest click confirmed the transmission. His voice barely registered in the void, swallowed by the total absence of sound. The human team was moving in total silence, communicating, not with words, but with actions. It was a technique honed through years of war. War fought not with weapons, but with presence. The humans knew the power of absence, of becoming the space around them. In the absence of light, they had learned to harness the silence, the very stillness of the dark, and turn it into a weapon. As they neared the core, Voss's team halted. No one spoke, but the signal was clear. They'd reached the junction. From this point, the core was just 2 levels below, and there were no more patrols. The Karsal was empty now. At least, it felt that way. As if every life aboard the ship had been hollowed out, leaving behind only the shell of a once mighty warship. But the humans were not hollow. They were full of purpose, full of intent. They were a species that had evolved in darkness. The first explorers of their world had lived in caves, hunted in twilight forests, and faced the endless dangers of their night skies. They had developed keen senses, sharper instincts, and an unshakable drive to survive. And when they found themselves in the shadows of this massive alien vessel, they didn't falter. They became the shadows. In the dark, they were home. Up above, in the vast observation tower of the Karsal, Voltron's mind raced. The truth was settling in, a bitter reality he couldn't escape. The humans had engineered their species to thrive in the night. They were the predators, not the hunted. No technology or weaponry had prepared him for this, a species that had turned what should have been their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. He had underestimated them. The Tarsari had believed that a ship like the Karsal could crush anything the humans sent, that their advanced weaponry and unrelenting firepower would break them. But this wasn't a battle of strength, it was a battle of will, and humans had an infinite supply. "Sir," a voice called out from the tactical station, "we've lost contact with the engineering crew again. They've gone silent. The shields are down." Voltron felt his stomach tighten. Shields down. That meant the ship was exposed, vulnerable. It wasn't just sabotage anymore. It was a systematic dismantling of everything the Karsal represented. The humans had picked them apart, piece by piece, deck by deck, until nothing was left but the husk of an alien warship drifting in a void of their making. "Activate the internal purge," Voltron ordered, his voice steady despite the rising panic in his chest. "Flood the decks with plasma." "Sir, the venting system is offline. It's not possible." The alien general slammed his fist onto the console. "Then fix it. Do not let them take us." But it was too late. The humans had already taken more than just the ship. They had taken control of the fear that now gripped every officer in the room. Voltron stared at the stars, the cold, distant universe, and for the first time in his long career, he understood the true meaning of darkness. And in that darkness, the humans were waiting. The silence on the Karsal was palpable, an oppressive weight pressing down on every surface, suffocating every living thing that remained aboard. Voltron paced the command deck, his 6 legs clicking rhythmically against the floor, though the sound was drowned in the thick, echoing void of the ship. His mind churned, his thoughts frantically searching for any logical explanation to the madness unraveling before him. But there was no logic here. No pattern. Just the haunting knowledge that the humans had turned the game on its head. Every sensor, every piece of equipment, told the same story. Nothing. The ship's outer defenses were still intact, yet the internal systems had been hacked, disabled, sabotaged in ways that defied all known technology. The humans weren't just sneaking around, picking off vulnerable systems. They were everywhere, all at once, like a presence that had somehow infiltrated the very molecules of the Karsal. Voltron had seen them move through the shadows, impossibly fast, like phantoms. A team of his best soldiers had gone to investigate the reactor core, and they had never returned. Their bodies had been found, but not in the way they should have been. He had thought the darkness itself was his enemy, But now he realized that it wasn't the blackness that threatened them. It was the humans. The humans were the predators of the night, the ones who had learned to weave themselves into the fabric of fear and make it their ally. The Karsal, a ship designed to be a symbol of Tarsari supremacy, now felt more like a prison. In the lower bowels of the ship, Sergeant Voss crouched in the belly of the beast, his breathing slow and controlled, his senses heightened by years of combat training. He had been down here for hours, moving through the shadows like a wraith. The darkness was no longer just a tool for concealment, it was his domain. His team had cleared each deck as they descended, eliminating anything that moved, any hostile life form. Yet, even now, they moved with a quiet urgency, knowing that this ship, this once impenetrable fortress, was rapidly becoming something else. It was a trap. Voss's fingers tightened around the grip of his plasma rifle, the familiar weight grounding him in reality. His team had moved through the wreckage of the reactor core, finding nothing but signs of confusion and desperation. The aliens had become animals, frightened and cornered. Voss could feel the shift in the air, a pulse of energy that told him they weren't alone anymore. The feeling had been creeping up on him for hours, a deep, gnawing sense of being watched. And not by the aliens. "Sergeant," whispered one of his team members, a young woman with sharp eyes and a deadly aim, "we've got something. It's moving." Voss froze, his eyes darting to the corner where the shadows seemed to twist unnaturally. His heart pounded in his chest, but his movements remained fluid, instinctive. He had trained for this, the art of the hunt. He knew how to move, how to stay still, how to use the darkness to his advantage. He motioned for his team to spread out, their movements synchronizing in perfect harmony. The team was a machine, each member a cog in an intricate dance. They had hunted together before, but nothing in their training had prepared them for this. Sudden movement in the dark. A flash, quick, too quick for the eye to follow, and then silence again. The Karsal creaked and groaned beneath them, its bones betraying its age. But it wasn't the ship's decay that filled Voss with dread. It was the knowledge that something, or someone, was playing with them, toying with them, like prey. And then the first shot rang out, a brilliant burst of energy that illuminated the corridor for a fraction of a second. A soldier fell, her scream, cut short as the plasma bolt incinerated her. Voss moved before the body hit the ground, darting to cover behind a metal support beam, his rifle aimed. But there was nothing to fire at. Just the sound of heavy breathing and the echo of footsteps. No longer footsteps of the alien invaders, but of something different, something human. Voss's mind raced as he tried to process the situation. He had seen human hunters before, the way they moved, the way they tracked prey with precision and patience. But this was something else entirely. It wasn't just the hunt. It was a twisted game, a hunt within a hunt, and they were the game. The humans had become the shadows, slipping through the cracks, exploiting every weakness. They had made the darkness their own. The lights flickered once more, casting long, jagged shadows along the walls. For a brief moment, Voss thought he saw something in the corner of his vision. A figure, cloaked in black, blending seamlessly with the gloom. It didn't move like the aliens. It moved like him, like a predator. Voss's instincts flared. This was not just a soldier. This was something else. This was the true essence of human nature. The ability to adapt, to become part of the very thing that threatened them, and then use it against those who thought they had the upper hand. Voss's mind snapped into focus. The humans weren't afraid of the dark. They embraced it. They understood it. And they had turned it into their weapon. A weapon that was now aimed directly at him and his team. He signaled for the others to fall back, knowing that they needed to regroup, to think, to survive. But as they turned to retreat, the figure moved again, faster this time, closer. Voss's breath caught in his throat as he realized what was happening. They weren't the hunters anymore. They were the hunted. Voltron stood alone in the command center, staring out at the dark expanse of space that stretched infinitely before him. The stars seemed distant, cold, and indifferent to the chaos that was unfolding aboard his ship. The Karsal was supposed to be a symbol of his species' dominance, a fortress of unmatched technological prowess. Now, it was a haunted tomb, a place where shadows themselves had learned to kill. He could still hear the screams of his soldiers echoing in his mind, the sudden, guttural cries that had been silenced just as quickly as they had begun. The humans had not only invaded his ship, they had twisted it, made it a hunting ground, a place of fear and confusion. Each moment that passed was another inch deeper into the abyss. Voltron's mind churned with fury, but underneath that, there was something else, an unsettling feeling of awe. His thoughts were interrupted by the flicker of the holographic display in front of him, a small, blinking warning symbol flashing, red. His sensors had picked up something. Movement, but not just any movement. This was a concentration of energy, a signature that didn't belong to any species he recognized. It was human technology, yes, but it was somehow different. More refined, more lethal. A flash of recognition hit him like a blow to the chest. He had seen this before, in the deepest, darkest archives of his species' records. A weapon that had been all but erased from history, thought to be nothing more than a myth. The humans had called it the Night Hunter, a silent, deadly ship designed to blend with the dark, to move unseen, to strike without warning. It was said that only the bravest of their warriors had piloted such craft, and only the most skilled had survived. The hunt. If the rumors were true, the Night Hunter had been used in the darkest corners of the galaxy, where even the bravest had feared to tread. It was a tool of destruction, a weapon that could turn the very fabric of space itself into a trap. Now, Voltron understood. The Night Hunter was not just a weapon. It was a force, a harbinger of human willpower. They weren't just sneaking around in the dark. They had become it. They were moving through his ship like ghosts, using every shadow as their ally, every unguarded corner as a place to strike from. They had learned to become the darkness. A sudden, sharp crackling over. The comms snapped him out of his thoughts. A distorted voice, barely audible, broke through the static. "It's here. They found us. We can't." The transmission cut off abruptly. The last word echoed in the air, unfinished, hanging in the silence like a dagger poised to strike. Voltron's mind raced. He had to act. He couldn't let his crew, his legacy, be destroyed by these creatures. But what could he do? How could he fight something that had already mastered the art of war within the very shadows that once protected them? His superior technology, his mighty fleet, his vast knowledge, all of it meant nothing in the face of an enemy who had become the darkness itself. His hand hovered over the emergency alert, his fingers trembling. He considered calling for reinforcements, but in the back of his mind, a cruel truth gnawed at him. The Night Hunter was just a part of the human arsenal. There were more out there, hidden within the vast, uncharted depths of space, waiting to make their move. The humans had no fear of the dark. In fact, it was their ally, their home, and now it was his worst enemy. As if on cue, another burst of static filled the command center. This time, it wasn't a transmission. It was something far worse. An inhuman screech, a chilling, high-pitched wail that vibrated the very walls of the Karsal. It echoed down the halls, reverberating. In the empty spaces, a sound so primal that it made Voltron's skin crawl. It was the sound of something far older than even his species, something that knew how to hunt in the deepest parts of the universe. The lights on the ship flickered, and for a brief moment, Voltron thought he saw something move outside the viewports. The shadows shifted unnaturally, crawling across the walls like living things. He could hear the soft scuffle of footsteps, a soft, subtle sound that carried far more menace than it should have. The humans weren't just using the dark as a tool, they were living it, embodying it in a way that no one had ever thought possible. He barely had time to react as a blur of motion darted across his field of vision. Someone, moved with speed and precision, their body blending seamlessly with the shadows. For an instant, he thought he saw the glint of metal, the outline of a human figure, but it was gone before he could focus. His heart raced, his pulse quickening. The Night Hunter was here. The hunt had begun. A voice, cold and calculated, whispered from the darkness, cutting through the thick silence like a knife. "Voltron." It's too late. The voice wasn't human, but the accent was unmistakable. It was the voice of a human. A soldier, perhaps. But it was distorted, warped by the interference of the ship's dying systems. But there was no mistaking the chill of finality in those words. The trap had been set, and the hunters were closing in. Voltron felt a cold sweat break out along his brow. His mind screamed at him to act, to fight back, but his body was frozen, paralyzed by the sheer terror of the unknown. He had never been afraid of the dark. But now, in this moment, the dark terrified him more than anything he had ever faced. The Karsal was no longer a ship. It was a coffin. And inside, the humans had already claimed their prey. The ship trembled as the lights flickered once more. The Karsal was dying, its once mighty systems unraveling at the seams, undone by an enemy who had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest weapon. Voltron's mind raced as he stumbled through the darkened halls, trying to make sense of the madness. How had it come to this? How had his forces, his elite warriors, been so easily overrun? It was unthinkable. And yet here he was, running from the very shadows his species had once commanded. With each passing second, the darkness seemed to grow deeper, thicker, as if it had a life of its own. The air was heavy with the scent of burning circuits and something far more unsettling, something that couldn't be quantified by any sensor. It was fear. Voltron's own fear. The fear of something he had never truly understood until now. The Night Hunter was not just a ship. It was a predator, a living thing that thrived on terror. Every corner of the Karsal had become its domain, every passageway its hunting ground. The humans had stripped the ship of its defenses, not with brute force, but with something far more insidious. They had turned it into a labyrinth, each darkened hallway a death trap waiting to spring. Voltron's warriors had once been the apex predators of the galaxy, but now they were prey, hunted by an enemy they had underestimated. Suddenly, a sharp hiss echoed from behind him, and Voltron's heart nearly stopped. His instinct screamed at him to move, to turn and fight. But the darkness closed in too quickly. He spun around, his pulse thundering in his ears, and for a brief moment he thought he saw the silhouette of a figure. No, figures, moving in the shadows. They were silent, swift, and then they were gone, leaving only a trail of cold dread in their wake. He could feel their eyes on him, though he couldn't see them. He could feel the cold, calculating presence of the humans, their training, their discipline, everything they were in those fleeting moments of contact. His breath came in ragged gasps, his mind teetering on the edge of panic. The truth was becoming clear. The humans had not only invaded his ship, they had become a part of it. They had mastered the dark, not by hiding from it, but by becoming one with it. And in doing so, they had gained a power that no technology, no weapon could counter. The very nature of darkness itself was now their ally. The idea that humans feared the night was a cruel joke. They had learned to wield it as a weapon more dangerous than any fleet or war machine. A sudden voice crackled through his comms, breaking through the oppressive silence. It was a transmission. From his last surviving officer, their voice distorted but desperate. "Voltron, we're not going to make it. They're everywhere. Everywhere." There was a pause, and then the voice broke into a frenzied whisper. "They're like ghosts. We can't fight them. We can't even see them. They're hunting us." The transmission cut off abruptly, the silence that followed suffocating. Voltron stood frozen, his mind gripped by a cold realization. His crew, his soldiers, had been reduced to mere prey. The Karsal was no longer a place of power. It was a tomb, and the humans had sealed its fate. With a final gut-wrenching scream, Voltron turned and ran, his footsteps echoing against the hollow walls of the dying ship. He could hear them now, the humans, their whispers, their footfalls, soft, almost imperceptible, but present. They were hunting him, just as they had hunted his crew. There was nowhere left to hide. The shadows closed in around him, suffocating him with their weight. The hum of the ship's failing systems was the only sound, a haunting reminder that everything he had built, everything his species had strived for, was slipping away. Then, it happened. A figure appeared before him, silent, like a shadow. Its eyes glinted in the faint light, but its form was barely visible, a blur in the dark. Voltron stumbled backward, his hand reaching for his weapon, but it was too late. The human was already upon him, moving with inhuman speed, their form blending into the shadows as if they had never been separate from it. "You thought you knew fear." The human's voice was low, steady, and terrifyingly calm. "But you've never known it like this." And with that, the darkness swallowed him whole. The last thing Voltron saw before the world went black was the soft flicker of the emergency lights, casting fleeting shadows across the walls, a grim reminder of the unstoppable force that had just taken his life. In his final moments, he understood. The humans didn't fear the dark. They had become it. And now, they had used it to destroy him. The Karsal was silent once more, its halls now emptied of the once proud Voltron and his crew. The ship drifted, lost in the vast emptiness of space, a silent monument to the hubris of a species that had underestimated the humans. In the depths of the galaxy, far from the wreckage of the Karsal, another human ship waited, its crew, its warriors, its hunters, ready to strike again. The darkness was theirs now, and in its cold, impenetrable embrace, they would continue to hunt, to survive, and to conquer. Because in the end, the humans had proven the one thing that no one had ever imagined. When they faced the darkness, they didn't hide from it. They hunted in it.